The shot cracked through the valley just after 6:30 a.m., sharp and quick, slicing through the calm like a whip. Travis McMillan looked up from his mug of black coffee, already halfway across the kitchen before the sound had even finished echoing. Off the pine-dotted ridges that lined the back of his property. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Maybe an old truck backfiring, or a farmer in the distance. But something felt off. The birds had stopped. Even his golden retriever, Hank, didn't move from his spot near the sliding door. His ears were up, rigid, pointed toward the woods. Travis stepped outside onto the back patio barefoot, scanning the open acre of lawn that sloped into a narrow band of trees. The fence line, tall, well-kept, marked the boundary between his land and the HOA's supposed wildlife corridor. The HOA had insisted years ago it was to remain untouched, a buffer zone. But lately, he'd heard rumors about that changing. Didn't see anyone. No smoke, no flash, no motion in the trees. Just silence. By the time he reached the far end of the property, the dew had soaked through his sweatpants. He knelt where the grass had been flattened. Something had torn through. There were indentations in the mud, spaced far apart, hooves, large ones running. Then he saw it, a splash of red just beyond the fence. Not paint, not berries. Blood. He followed the trail further into the tree line, careful to stay on his side. The pattern was unmistakable. A wounded animal, judging by the size, maybe a mature buck. The blood wasn't the only thing odd. There was a strip of orange flagging tape tied to a sapling, something hunters often used to mark a path, but it was on his tree. When Travis returned to the house, he sat down and opened the HOA handbook. Page after page of parking restrictions, garden limitations, even acceptable mailbox colors. Nothing about firearms. Nothing about hunting. But one phrase stuck out in a paragraph near the back. Seasonal wildlife. Mitigation may occur under the discretion of the HOA board to maintain natural balance in the common ecosystem. That night, Travis sent an email to the HOA president, Carl Jennings, with a simple question. Had anyone authorized hunting near his property? He got a reply the next morning, a short one. We've received no reports of activity matching your concern. Likely unrelated to our neighborhood. Let us know if anything else comes up. He read it twice. The wording felt practiced, like they had it ready, but that afternoon, the mail carrier left a certified envelope at his door. Inside was a notice of new HOA activities regarding deer population management. It included a vague map of a community-controlled zone that seemed to stretch uncomfortably close to Travis's fence. And at the bottom, typed in small letters, was a name he recognized. Karen Delgado. Board chair. Karen had been a problem since she'd moved in 3 years ago. Always hovering at meetings, always the first to call in lawn complaints, always the last to admit fault. She ran the board with fake kindness, the sort that curdled the moment you turned your back. Evening, Travis walked to the edge of the woods again, this time with his phone. Camera recording. It took 20 minutes before he saw movement. 2 figures dressed in dark camo, rifles slung over their shoulders, emerged from the trees and ducked behind a brush pile that bordered his property. One of them turned and pointed at a low branch marked with fresh flagging tape. They were whispering, coordinated like they knew exactly where to go. Travis ducked down and kept filming. Then, from behind the far oak, a third person stepped into view. Shorter, wearing a blazer. Karen. She gestured casually toward the back of Travis's land like it was hers. She didn't look at the camera. She didn't even look around. Travis hit stop and saved the footage. He wasn't going to email the board again. This time, he was going to make sure someone far outside the HOA saw what he just filmed. Because this wasn't just a policy violation. It was trespassing. It was illegal hunting. It was something else entirely. And Karen, smiling politely while leading armed strangers through someone else's land, was about to find out how fast things could turn. By the next morning, Travis had already reviewed the footage 5 times. The camera feed wasn't perfect, some of it grainy, slightly shaky, but it showed enough. The rifles, the flagging tape, Karen's unmistakable ponytail, and her distinct limp from a twisted ankle she'd complained about at the last HOA meeting. It was her, beyond a doubt. But the problem wasn't just who he saw. It was what they were doing and how smoothly it all seemed to operate. This wasn't a one-time incident. This felt organized. Travis's wife, Marlene, sat beside him at the dining table, her reading glasses halfway down her nose. She rarely got involved with HOA drama. She preferred her books and her garden. But after watching the clip, even she leaned forward and muttered, "That woman's not just entitled, she's dangerous." They decided not to approach Karen directly. That never worked. Instead, Travis drove to the local outdoor supply store and bought 4 more trail cameras, 2 with infrared, 2 with motion-triggered sound. He spent the evening mounting them at different heights, in the trees along his back fence well within his property line, facing outward, silently watching. Next night, one of them captured a conversation. The audio was faint, but the voices were clear. A man's voice. She said, "This zone's safe. Property owner's old, doesn't come out here." A second voice chuckled. "Let's just tag 2 and get out before daylight." They weren't from the neighborhood. Their plates, cut on. A different camera earlier. We're out --state. Travis forwarded the video and audio clips to wildlife enforcement, flagged as possible unauthorized hunting on private land. He attached a screenshot of the HOA map Karen had slipped into his mailbox. He didn't know what it would lead to, but he knew something was going to break soon. That weekend, he decided to attend the HOA meeting in person, not just to observe but to confront. The community center was quiet as usual, a lukewarm pot of coffee in the corner, and 3 folding tables pushed into a square. Karen sat at the head, flanked by 2 other board members, Ned Lawson and Irene Fielding, who were both more bark than bite. Travis took a seat near the back and waited. After the usual updates, loan violations, pool maintenance, Fiskaren brought up a new agenda item, seasonal wildlife mitigation continuation plan. It sounded harmless, scientific even. Travis raised his hand. Karen squinted at him, her smile thin. Mr. McMillan? Yes. He stood. Is this mitigation part of the plan that involves strangers with rifles walking across private property at dawn? The room shifted. Several neighbors looked up from their phones. Karen blinked. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I have video, he said, from last week. Hunters walking behind my shed. You're on the footage too. Directing them. A pause. Then, I was simply inspecting the green zone boundaries. Travis pulled a tablet from his coat. He tapped the screen. The first image came up. Karen, standing near the oak tree behind his lot. 2 hunters beside her, one pointing toward the house. Karen's eyes darted to Ned and Irene. This isn't what it looks like. We have management rights over the wildlife corridor. Travis stepped forward. That corridor isn't HOA land. I pulled the original survey records. That area's entirely on my deeded property. Everything behind my fence. Mine, not yours, and definitely not the HOA's. Now there were murmurs. A couple of homeowners whispered to each other. Karen leaned forward, her voice strained. Then perhaps the maps were outdated. They weren't, Travis said, and wildlife enforcement already has the footage. So if this continues, it's not going to be a warning next time. Conran said nothing. The meeting ended without a resolution, but the tension was clear. Something had shifted. Later that night, Travis found another ribbon tied to one of his trees, this time. Higher up, almost hidden. Someone had come back. But now, they weren't just hunting deer. They were playing a much more dangerous game. They had no idea how closely they were being watched in return. 3 days passed without another shot. No new flags, no movement on the cameras. Travis didn't trust the quiet. Neither did Marlene. She spent her afternoons pruning the rose bushes, but her eyes stayed on the tree line. Travis checked the footage twice a day. He'd moved one of the infrared cameras higher into the canopy, aimed toward the side gate. It had caught something strange the night before. Shadow, just beyond the property line. A person in a hood, crouched, staying low, no face, no ID. Just gone again in under 30 seconds. That same day, a letter arrived from the HOA, not from the board, specifically from Karen Delgado's email address, printed and slipped into their mailbox. It was a printed policy draft, marked confidential in all caps. Travis unfolded it on the kitchen table and scanned the pages. It was formatted like an official amendment to the HOA bylaws, numbered clauses, definitions, and language thick, enough to make a lawyer sweat. But Travis wasn't looking for legalese, he was looking for something buried, and he found it. On page 4, HOA-approved wildlife management activities may occur in common access buffer zones, including those adjacent to residential properties, at the discretion of the acting board chair, with or without resident approval. In accordance with Section 11G, the words felt manufactured. No legal reference, no matching citation. He checked the original handbook issued when he bought the property. Section 11G didn't exist. There wasn't even an 11-F. Marlene said. What he was thinking? She's making up rules now. But it wasn't just about rule breaking. Karen was trying to build a paper trail, something that could be waved around if enforcement came knocking. She wanted to give the illusion of authority, and most residents wouldn't question it. They'd see the format, the bold print, signature, and assume it was legitimate. Travis didn't bite. He returned to the county assessor's office the next morning. He met with a clerk named Ed, a quiet man in a fishing vest who smelled faintly of engine oil. Ed was more than happy to dig through the records once Travis explained the issue. Within 20 minutes, Ed laid out 3 documents. Travis's original property plat, the HOA's boundary overlay, and the county's protected woodland registry. You see this section here? Ed tapped the map where the woods behind Travis's fence were marked in light green. That's not common area. That's yours. Fully deeded, bought and paid. No easement, no shared rights. Not even the HOA maintenance crew can legally step foot back there unless you invite them. Travis nodded. Then what about this amendment? He handed over Karen's draft. Ed took one look, snorted softly, then said, "That's not an amendment. That's a Word doc with a logo on top. Probably printed it off her kitchen laptop." So Travis asked the next question. Who enforces this kind of thing if it escalates? Ed looked up. If someone's bringing guns onto your property under false authority, you're not dealing with a policy dispute. That's criminal trespass. Maybe more. Wildlife enforcement would handle the hunting, local PD handles the rest. Back home, Travis compiled a new folder: drone photos, the fake amendment, copies of his deed, the infrared footage, and a timeline. He labeled it evidence, Delgado, and backed it up 3 times. He didn't plan on using it unless she pushed first. That night, something new happened. The camera near the back tree line caught a vehicle. Not parked, not passing. It pulled up just outside the property boundary, idled for 4 minutes, then turned its headlights off. A figure stepped out, holding a flashlight. They didn't come closer, just stood there, watching. Travis stayed awake. For hours, sitting on the porch in the dark with a thermos of coffee and his shotgun cradled by his feet. Whoever was testing the limits of his patience didn't understand something important. He hadn't moved here to be left alone. He'd moved here because he knew how to fight when he needed to, and this fight was just beginning. By the following morning, Travis had already printed stills from the vehicle footage. No plates, but the outline of the truck was unmistakable. Old, lifted Silverado, early 2000s model, dark green or black. Travis had grown up around trucks like that. Hunters favored them. Loud engines, reinforced beds, windows tinted enough to hide gear but not enough to raise suspicion. Whoever was behind that wheel wasn't lost. He knew where he was. He wanted Travis to know he was being watched. That changed the pace. Travis crossed the street later that day to visit Ray Collier, the oldest resident in Oak Ridge Estates. Ray had lived on the ridge before it became an HOA-controlled development. His house, grandfathered in, was perched on a stone foundation with a rusty weather vane still spinning over the chimney. If anyone had the old land records, it would be him. Ray welcomed Travis in with a cautious glance and a nod. "You staring up something with that board again?" Travi didn't bother denying it. He laid the problem out quietly, carefully, and without dramatics. By the end of it, Ray had gone silent, sipping coffee from a ceramic mug shaped like a raccoon's face. Then he stood, walked to the hallway closet, and came back with a cracked plastic storage case. Inside, stacked in sleeves yellowed by time, were the original survey maps from the early construction days of the neighborhood boundaries, lots, even the planned HOA green zones. Ray spread them across the table and tapped his finger on a shaded section labeled Lot Dizanavi Byches Menes McMillan. "This here's you," he said. "Now look close. See that dotted line? That's the old easement for the service trail. Ran behind the fence back in the late 90s, before it was paved over. But here, see this. That trail stops dead right at your southwest marker. They can't legally cross it without your sig." Travis took photos, careful to catch the dates, the assessor's stamps, the surveyor's signatures. It matched what Ed had told him at the county office. The difference was this map wasn't part of a public file. The HOA wouldn't know about it unless they'd gone digging, and based on Karen's fake amendment. She clearly hadn't. Back home, Travis reviewed the timeline again. The gunshot, the flagged trees, Karen's forged claws, the appearance of out-of-state hunters. Then he remembered something Marlene had told him in passing about the couple 2 streets down who'd recently sold early. She'd mentioned it. Was sudden, all cash, no realtor. The house had been empty for only 2 days before a new family moved in. Too fast for paperwork to clear. That night he walked the long route around the block. He stopped across from the house in question. A spotlight was on in the back. Truck parked in the driveway. No plates again. It was the Silverado. He backed off, returned home, and dialed wildlife enforcement. The woman who answered didn't ask many questions. She took the footage, the timeline, the fake claws, all of it. When she heard Karen Delgado's name and her role on the HOA, there was a pause. Then she said something that stuck with Travis long after the call ended. "She's not the first HOA board member we've had flagged for unauthorized land use. But if she's profiting from it, that changes everything." 2 mornings later, Officer Wayne Diller showed up at Travis's front door. Tall, wide-shouldered, and sharp-eyed, Wayne carried a badge for wildlife enforcement and a notepad already filled with notes. "I'm here for the property walk," he said. Together, they walked the fence line. Travis pointed out every flag, every camera, every spot where shell casings had been found. Wayne didn't say much, just took photos and nodded. When they reached the tree line, Travis showed him the bait pile buried slightly, but obvious too. Anyone who knew what to look for. "That's not leftover feed," Wayne muttered. "That's placement." Then he found something else. Tucked inside a hollowed-out stump just beyond the brush was a laminated map crudely marked with black X's in the initials OKZ, Overkill Zone, labeled trails, a staging point, even blind locations. Someone had drawn up a hunting map, and it wasn't just for show. Wayne tucked the map into an evidence bag. "We'll handle the illegal hunting," he said, "but the trespass, that'll be up to the sheriff. And if she's leasing your land out to strangers," he looked Travis in the eye, "then she's about to be in a whole new kind of trouble." Officer Wayne Diller returned 2 days later, not alone this time. A second truck pulled up behind his marked wildlife enforcement vehicle, windows dark, engine humming low. 2 agents stepped out plainclothes. No words. They nodded to Travis, opened the truck bed, and began unloading evidence bags. flagged markers, and a rolling camera tripod. They weren't just here to observe anymore. This was an operation. Wayne explained that one of the hunters they'd sighted earlier in the season had flipped after being handed a potential felony charge for poaching on protected land. In exchange for reduced sentencing, he'd shared everything: how he was invited to the property, who organized the drop points, and the amount he'd paid in cash for exclusive rights to hunt the buffer. The sum wasn't small, nearly $3,000, and the name on the text messages: Karen Delgado. Travis didn't say much. He didn't need to. They began combing the rear section of his lot, just along the inside edge of the wooded slope. 10 minutes in, one of the agents whistled and pointed. Behind a stacked wall of rotting firewood, partially obscured by brush and camo netting, was a small clearing. A rusted folding chair sat at the center, a half-empty can of beer still tucked in the coup folder behind it, a cooler. When they opened it, the stench hit first. Inside were chunks of venison, poorly wrapped in plastic, packed in melted ice. Maggots already clung to the edges. "It's a drop site," Wayne muttered. "They were using your property to field process. Guts get buried. Meat gets picked up later. Less chance of getting caught hauling it fresh." The second agent found something else: several flattened brass casings, half buried in the mud, each marked and consistent with recent use, one of them still warm to the touch. Wayne turned to Travis. "They were here last night." Travis clenched his jaw. "Then they knew we were watching. They're trying to finish fast." That afternoon, the team fanned out to map the site and collect every piece of evidence. They bagged the cooler, the beer can, the casings. They lifted boot prints from the soft earth. One of the treads matched the exact pattern found 2 weeks ago when someone had stood near Travis's shed under cover of night. They also collected something Travis hadn't. Noticed scratches on his fence gate, shallow and recent, from where a latch had clearly been opened and closed, not forced. Picked. That evening, the neighborhood buzzed with rumors. Word had leaked. A few residents had spotted the unmarked trucks. One woman posted online that armed environmental agents were combing the woods, and that something illegal and possibly dangerous was going on near the Greenbelt. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Karen, for once, wasn't present. Travis attended anyway. Sitting in the back row again, this time with his folder neatly stacked on his lap. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. Ned Lawson, vice chair, stood at the front podium, noticeably sweating. "There's been some misunderstanding about recent land use and enforcement presence in the community. Please know this board had no knowledge of any inappropriate activity on HOA grounds." Travis raised his hand. Ned flinched but nodded. Travis walked to the front and opened the folder. "This," he said, "is a map signed by a resident here that includes hunting zones marked as OKZ. This map was recovered on my property, not HOA property mine, and I didn't draw it." He laid it on the table. "This," he continued, pulling another page, "is a text message thread between that same resident and an out-of-state hunter. These messages reference payment, meetup times, and blind locations." Gasps rippled through the room. "And this," he said, holding up a final document, "is a wildlife enforcement report stating that protected animals were illegally hunted and processed on my land." Silence. A man from the back asked the question. Everyone was thinking who gave them permission. Travis didn't answer. He didn't have to. Karen's name was on every document. Someone stood up and walked out. Another person whispered, "She's finished." That night, Travis installed one more camera, this time aimed not at the woods, but at the front street. He had a feeling Karen hadn't gone far. And if the silence he felt was anything like last time, then it wasn't peace. It was someone holding their breath before the next shot. Karen returned to the neighborhood the next morning, just before sunrise. No one saw her arrive. No one saw her park. But her black SUV was in her driveway, nosed in like it was ready to leave again at any moment. The blinds were closed, lights off, mailbox untouched. Travis noticed first. He watched from his porch, sipping his coffee, motion sensor app open. On his phone, she didn't step outside. She didn't walk her dog. She didn't attend the follow-up board meeting scheduled that evening. Still, her presence changed something. Residents who once smiled as they jogged past her front yard now crossed the street without a glance. The air was different now, thick with distrust. By noon, the wildlife enforcement team had filed their initial report. A red-marked envelope arrived at Travis's door, hand-delivered. Inside was a formal summary. It confirmed everything. Illegal, blind, the bait pile, the evidence of field dressing, the signatures on the permit forged under HOA letterhead. But the most damning piece wasn't physical. It was financial. The hunter who'd flipped handed over a copy of the Venmo payment screen captures, complete with timestamps, and the name Karen D., listed as the recipient for 3 separate access donations. $3,000, $2,250, and $3,600, all within 60 days, labeled as fall lease, early access, and private land use. Karen hadn't just allowed hunting, she'd monetized it. Travis printed every screenshot and added them to his now overflowing evidence binder. Then he called the sheriff. Deputy who arrived was young, sharp, and clearly briefed. His cruiser barely idled before he approached with a clipboard and a notepad. He wasn't here to ask if anything happened. He was here to confirm what already had. "We've coordinated with wildlife enforcement," he said. "Trespassing, unlawful use of private property, potential fraud. If you're willing to submit a formal statement, this can move forward fast." Travis nodded. Every statement's already written. By evening, another HOA emergency meeting was called. This time, every seat was filled. Karen didn't attend, but her name was the first word spoken. Ned Lawson stood at the podium again, face pale, hands shaking. "The board is aware of serious allegations involving former chairwoman Karen Delgado. We are cooperating fully with local law enforcement and state wildlife officials. Effective immediately, she is suspended from all HOA activities pending investigation." Murmurs, whispers. One resident stood. "Pending? She forged maps. She took money. What's left to investigate?" Someone else chimed in. "She risked people's lives. What if a kid had walked back there?" Then, Travis spoke quietly, but with a tone that hushed the room. "This isn't just a violation of HOA trust. This was criminal. She used her position to profit off land she didn't own, put armed strangers behind my fence, and lied to this entire board to cover it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A slow collective breath moved through the room. Ned cleared his throat. "There will be a vote to revoke her board privileges permanently." It passed unanimously, but Karen wasn't done yet. That night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., one of Travis's newly installed driveway cameras picked up motion. A shadow moved across the lawn, not walking toward the house, but leaving it. The figure carried a bag over one shoulder, moving fast, eyes scanning the tree line. The timestamp confirmed it. Karen thought she was fleeing, not from her home, but from something else. At 7:05 a.m., a wildlife enforcement unit knocked on her door with a search warrant. Her SUV was gone. House dark. Entry forced. Empty, except for one thing. In the garage, nailed to the wall, was a laminated HOA map. The same one Travis had found behind his shed, but updated. It now showed a new staging zone, labeled SP2. It wasn't on his property anymore. It was across the boundary just over the HOA line, technically outside Travis's land. Technically not illegal, not yet. The implication was clear. Karen hadn't given up. She had just moved her game, and she was daring someone to follow. 3 days passed and no one saw Karen. Her house sat untouched, curtains drawn, mailbox brimming with unopened letters. The realtors hadn't come. The neighbors kept their distance. The only ones who seemed interested were the unmarked vehicles that circled twice a day, and the county patrol car that idled just long enough to make a point. But Travis wasn't convinced she was truly gone. The camera footage confirmed that she had left on foot the night of the raid, but no footage showed her vehicle ever departing, and something about the way she disappeared, leaving behind fresh trail markings and a hand-laminated map on the wall, didn't feel like surrender. It felt like bait. It was Marlene who noticed it first. She was trimming the rose hedge by the east gate when she paused, squinting toward the far tree line. There was a new glint between the trunk subtle, just a shimmer in the wind. At first, she thought it was a soda can or maybe a discarded wrapper, but when she stepped closer, what she found made her stomach turn. It was a bucket, half buried in brush, weighted down with rocks. Inside was corn-soaked and molasses deer bait. It was fresh. Marlene didn't touch it. She just backed away and called Travis. When Wayne Diller returned later that day, he brought someone new. A federal wildlife investigator, plain button-down, unmarked vehicle, serious eyes. They documented the bait bucket, measured the depth of placement, and confirmed it was set within 10 feet of the new blind shown on Karen's updated map. She had moved her operation, not shut it down. They also found hair strands stuck to the bark near the blind, deer fur, and boot tracks leading into different patterns. One small, light-footed, possibly Karen's, the other heavier, with deeper heel marks, likely male. Someone's helping her, Wayne muttered, or taking her place. Either way, the setup wasn't just for sport anymore. There were signs of recent kill activity: flies, disturbed soil, and draglines heading back toward the road. The same Silverado had been spotted circling 2 nights ago by a neighbor with a dash cam. No license plate. Same model. But there was something else, something Travis hadn't expected. A note. It was folded and wedged into the camera post he'd installed last month. A printed message in bold font. No handwriting, no fingerprints. Back off. This land doesn't belong to you. Wayne bagged the note. The federal agent said nothing, but his eyes lingered on it for a long time before finally saying, "She's escalating." That evening, a town hall was called, not just an HOA meeting, but a full open-door community session involving county officials, wildlife enforcement, and even a legal mediator. It was standing room only. The sheriff's office provided updates on the pending charges: fraud, criminal trespass, illegal hunting, and unlawful leasing of private land. But what shook the room more than anything else was what they announced next. Karen Delgado had wired her lease profits to a separate holding account, not for personal use, but to a land trust organization she'd registered under a different name. Delgado Land Use Solutions LLC. The trust had filed to purchase multiple lots bordering the HOA. If approved, she'd own enough adjacent land to build a perimeter trail legally and start her game again from the outside in. She wasn't just hiding, she was planning. Back at home, Travis stood at the fence line long after dark. The woods beyond were still. The wind rustled the grass just enough to make the trees seem alive. He knew she wasn't far. The following morning, as he checked his camera feeds, he found something new. One frame captured a shape of figure crouched low behind the trees at 3:42 a.m., partially obscured by brush, but still recognizable. It was Karen. Her face wasn't visible, but the scarf, the jacket, and the slight limp told the story. She had returned not to confront, not to explain, just to look, to remind him she was still watching. And whatever came next wasn't going to happen in broad daylight. Karen Delgado didn't knock. She didn't speak. She didn't leave a note. But early that Sunday morning, Travis watched from his porch as she stood across the road, half shrouded by mist rolling in from the hilltops. Her scarf fluttered gently, her stance calm, almost casual. She stared at his fence for exactly 47 seconds, then turned and walked away. She didn't look back. The moment she vanished behind the trees, Travis stood and quietly walked inside. He didn't call wildlife enforcement. He didn't alert the HOA board. There was no need anymore. Everyone who needed to see her had seen her. By noon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Karen, it was from her attorney, typed stiff and dry. It stated that Karen Delgado was no longer residing within the jurisdiction of Oak Ridge Estates and had formally relinquished her standing with the HOA. She claimed the recent allegations were part of a coordinated slander effort and that legal action would be taken against any continued defamation. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hunting, no admission of forged documents, bait buckets, or blinds. But Travis didn't care about the letter, because by then, the sheriff's office had already issued a formal cease and desist, and the wildlife enforcement report had reached the state level. Karen was on a list now, a real one, and her game wasn't just local anymore. It didn't take long for the for sale sign to go up in her yard. No agency branding, just a phone number. The neighbors kept their distance. Conversations held in hushed tones across driveways and community Facebook threads. The HOA had gone silent, focusing on damage control, claiming Karen had acted independently. But the damage couldn't be undone, especially not after what came next. 2 weeks later, Travis received a certified envelope. Inside was a copy of a new property record filed at the county office. A half-acre plot just outside the HOA boundaries had been purchased by a holding company called DL Woodland Ventures. The listed agent, someone named Marta Delgado, Karen's cousin. Travis drove out to the edge of the development where the pavement ended and gravel began. Sure enough, a new post had been staked into the ground just beyond the final HOA sign, the beginnings of a trail, fresh tire tracks. A field tent set up near the ridge. He stepped out of the truck, phone in hand, and walked carefully around the new plot. It was quiet, too quiet. He followed the trail markers, thin strips of blue flagging tape, newer than anything he'd seen before. They led down toward a shaded clearing near the creek, and there, tucked between two boulders, was a new blind, the same camo netting, the same bucket bait, and pinned to a nearby tree with a hunting knife was a laminated sign. Private hunting area trespassers will be prosecuted. It had no official state stamp, no permit number. Just a single line beneath it. This is not your land. He turned and left. No anger, no panic, just resolve. Travis called the same wildlife enforcement agent he'd spoken with weeks ago, shared the location, the name on the land trust, and the flagged markers. The agent sighed, like he'd been expecting it. She's not going to stop, is she? No, Travis said. But she picked the wrong woods this time. A week later, a sting was quietly carried out. A trail camera hidden on the new plot caught two men unloading rifles from the back of the same Silverado. A wildlife officer disguised as a hiker crossed into the zone and caught them mid-setup. Charges were filed. The property was temporarily seized for further investigation. Karen wasn't seen again. But even months later, when the leaves changed and the air grew thin and cold, Travis kept the cameras up. He still walked the fence line at dusk, flashlight in one hand, his dog at his side, because the fence didn't just mark his land anymore. It marked a lesson. Power doesn't come from a position on a board. It comes from knowing when to stand, when to fight, and when to watch the shadows, because sometimes they watch back. And in neighborhoods like Oak Ridge Estates, the shadows have long memories.